The room was warm, filled with the soft hum of voices and the faint scent of baby powder. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, landing gently on the tiny face resting in my arms. My son, my whole world, wrapped in a blanket no bigger than a memory. Everyone kept saying how beautiful he was. How perfect, how lucky I must feel, and I really did. But beneath that warmth, there was a familiar tension tightening in my chest, the kind that had followed me my entire life. Whenever my family gathered in one place, I tried to ignore it. I adjusted the blanket around my baby and kissed his forehead, letting his soft breathing calm me. For a moment, everything else faded, the noise, the expectations, the past. Then I heard it, a quiet sigh. I didn't even have to look up to know who it was. My mom. When I finally raised my eyes, there she stood across the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pressed into that thin line I knew too well. It wasn't just disapproval. It was judgment, sharp and silent. "Well," she said after a moment, her voice cutting through the chatter, "you're holding him an awful lot?" A few relatives chuckled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. I forced a small smile. "He's a newborn, Mom." She tilted her head slightly, as if I had just proven her point. "That's exactly why you shouldn't start bad habits. Bad habits." I looked down at my son again, my fingers instinctively tightening around him. He stirred slightly, as if sensing the shift in the air. "He just needs comfort," I said quietly, but my mom only shrugged, dismissing me with the same casual indifference she had always used. Before I could say anything else, a familiar voice chimed in. "Oh my God, let me see him properly. Lena." Of course, my sister pushed through the small crowd like she owned the room, her heels clicking confidently against the floor. She didn't even look at me at first. Her eyes were locked on the baby, filled with excitement that felt performative. "Wow," she said, leaning in close. "He's actually really cute." Actually, I swallowed the comment, trying to stay calm. "His name is Adam," I said, hoping to ground the moment in something real. Yeah. She waved it off. "Can I hold him?" It sounded like a question, but I knew better. Before I could answer, her hands were already reaching out, sliding under my son as if she had every right. My body reacted instantly. "Wait," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've got him." But she didn't stop. In one smooth motion, she lifted him from my arms, and just like that, he was gone. The warmth that had been pressed against my chest disappeared, leaving behind a cold emptiness that spread faster than I could control. My heart started pounding. "Lena," I said, standing up now, "give him back." She barely glanced at me, already swaying slightly as if she were the one who had carried him for 9 months. "Relax," she said with a small laugh. "You're acting like I'm going to drop him." A couple of people chuckled again. "I didn't," I said, "give him back." This time, my voice didn't waver. For a split second, Lena's smile faltered, but only slightly. Then she rolled her eyes. "God, you've become so sensitive." I looked past her, straight at my mom. This was the moment, the same moment that had repeated itself in different forms my entire life, the moment where she could step in. Say something, choose me, but she didn't. She simply shifted her weight and said, honestly, "Stop making a scene." A scene. The word hit harder than I expected, because suddenly I wasn't standing in my living room anymore. I was 10 years old again, being told to apologize when Lena broke something. I was 16, being called dramatic for crying. I was invisible all over again, except this time I wasn't alone. My gaze snapped back to my son, cradled carelessly in Lena's arms as she laughed with someone behind me. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Lena," I said, low and steady, Give me my son, now. The room went quiet. Even Lena felt it this time. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time there was something unfamiliar in her expression. Not amusement, not annoyance, something closer to surprise, because I had never sounded like that before. And deep down, we both knew this wasn't just about a baby. This was about everything that had come before. And something told me this time it wasn't going to end the way it always had. That night, the house was finally quiet. Too quiet. The same walls that had echoed with laughter just hours ago now felt heavy, almost suffocating. I sat alone in the nursery, the soft glow of a night lamp casting shadows that stretched across the walls like memories I couldn't escape. Adam slept peacefully in my arms, his tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Every breath he took felt like a reminder something pure, something untouched by the kind of hurt I had carried for years. I gently brushed my finger across his cheek, my heart tightening. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was apologizing to him or to myself. The moment kept replaying in my head, Lena's hands taking him, my mom's voice dismissing me, the laughter. The silence, it wasn't new, that was the worst part. It was painfully familiar. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a second, and just like that, the past came rushing in. I was 8 years old again, standing in the kitchen, holding a broken glass I hadn't dropped. Lena stood behind me, quiet for once, watching as Mom's anger landed entirely on me. "Why can't you be more careful?" she had snapped. I had tried to explain. I didn't. Stop making excuses. And Lena. She said nothing. She never had to. Then I was 12, sitting on the edge of my bed while Mom helped Lena get ready for a school event. Curling her hair, fixing her dress, telling her how beautiful she looked. I had stood in the doorway waiting, hoping she'd notice me too. She didn't, and then 16, crying after a fight with a friend, only to be told I was too emotional and needed to toughen up. While Lena, once again, was comforted for things far smaller. It had always been like that. She was the center. I was the afterthought. I opened my eyes, staring down at Adam. "No," I said quietly, "not anymore." My voice felt different. Stronger, not loud, not angry, just certain. I adjusted him gently in my arms and stood up, walking over to his crib. For a moment I hesitated. I didn't want to let go, not just of him, but of the feeling that I still had control over something, over someone who needed me. Carefully, I laid him down, watching as he shifted slightly before settling again. Safe, that word lingered in my mind. Safe, that's what I wanted for him. And suddenly, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. I had never felt that growing up. Not really. Not emotionally. And I wasn't going to let him grow up the same way. I walked out of the nursery and into the living room, where the traces of the gathering still remained: empty cups, folded blankets, the faint smell of perfume lingering in the air. My phone buzzed on the table, one message, then another, then another. I already knew who it was. "Lena, you seriously overreacted today." "Mom, I don't know why you embarrassed us like that." "Lena again. It's just a baby. Relax." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering just above it. For years, I would have responded immediately. Explained myself, defended my feelings, tried to fix things. I would have apologized even when I wasn't wrong. But this time something stopped me. I locked the phone and set it back down. Silence, not weakness. Choice. The next morning, the messages kept coming. Missed calls, voicemails, more texts, each one slightly sharper than the last. "Are you ignoring us? This is childish. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I made coffee, fed Adam, sat by the window and let the sunlight warm my face. It felt strange at first, this quiet refusal to engage. Like I was breaking some unspoken rule that had governed my life for as long as I could remember. But with every hour that passed, it felt a little less wrong, and a little more freeing. By the third day, the tone of the messages began to shift. Mom, I don't understand what's going on. Lena, you're taking this way too far. Mom again, we're family. Family, I let out a slow breath, reading that word over and over again. For them, family had always meant tolerance, endurance, silence. For me, it was starting to mean something else entirely: respect, boundaries, peace. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I typed slowly, carefully, making sure every word felt true. I'm not taking anything too far. I'm finally drawing a line. I stared at the message for a second before pressing send. The reply came almost instantly. What does that even mean? I looked toward the nursery, where Adam was sleeping peacefully. Then back at the screen. My fingers moved again. It means things are going to be different now. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what would come next. By the end of the week, the silence I had created began to feel like a shield. Not something fragile, but something solid, protective. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. Adam lay beside me on the couch, his tiny hand wrapped around my finger, as if he trusted me completely. And maybe that was what gave me strength. The quiet, undeniable responsibility of knowing that someone was depending on me to be better than what I had grown up with. The knock on the door came just after noon, sharp, impatient. I froze for half a second. Then it came again. I already knew. Of course they wouldn't wait to be invited. Of course they wouldn't respect the space I had tried to create. I gently placed Adam in his crib, making sure he was settled before walking to the door. Each step felt deliberate, like I was walking into something I had avoided my entire life. When I opened it, there they were. My mom stood in front, arms crossed just like always. Lena stood beside her, scrolling through her phone like this was an inconvenience she had been forced to attend. "We need to talk," my mom said immediately, her tone firm as if she still had authority here. I didn't step aside. "No," I said calmly, "you need to listen." The words hung in the air longer than I expected. Lena looked up from her phone, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Excuse me," she said, almost laughing, but I didn't move. I didn't break eye contact. Something about that must have shifted the energy, because for the first time neither of them spoke over me. "You don't get to come into my home uninvited," I continued, my voice steady, and act like nothing happened. "Oh my God," Lena sighed dramatically. "You're still on that?" I turned to her slowly. "Yes," I said, "I am." She scoffed. "It's not that deep. I held the baby, big deal." "No," I replied, my tone firm now. "You took my child out of my arms after I told you not to." Her expression tightened. "That's what you're not understanding," I continued. "It's not about what you did. It's about the fact that you think you had the right to do it." For once, Lena didn't have a quick comeback. So my mom stepped in just like she always had. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said. "We're family. There's no need for all this attitude." I let out a slow breath. There it was again, that word, family, used like a shield, used like an excuse. I looked at her, really looked this time. Not as the authority figure I had spent years trying to please, but as a person who had failed to protect me when it mattered. "Family doesn't mean you get to ignore my boundaries," I said quietly. Her face changed just slightly. "I'm your mother," she replied, her voice hardening, "and I'm his." I said immediately, silence heavy. "Unavoidable, and that means," I continued, "what I say about my child's goes." Lena shook her head, clearly irritated now. "You've changed," I almost smiled. "Yes," I said, "I have." There was something powerful about admitting that. Not apologizing for it, not softening it, just owning it. I'm not that person anymore. I went on. The one who stays quiet so everyone else stays comfortable. My mom shifted uncomfortably, her arms finally uncrossing. That's not fair, she said. We've always cared about you. I held her gaze, caring about someone. I said slowly means respecting them. She didn't respond. Because she couldn't, I took a step forward, not aggressively, but enough to make it clear I wasn't backing down. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but firm. You don't come here without asking. You don't take my child without permission. And you don't dismiss me like I don't matter. Lena opened her mouth, but I raised my hand slightly. I'm not finished. That alone stopped her. If you can respect that, I said, then we can move forward. I paused, letting the next words settle before I spoke them. If you can't, then you won't be part of our lives. The air shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for them to realize this wasn't an empty threat. This wasn't the version of me they were used to. This wasn't something they could laugh off or push aside. This was real. Lena looked at my mom, as if waiting for her to fix it, like she always had. But this time she didn't. Neither of them spoke, and for the first time in my life their silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like recognition, like they were finally seeing me, not as the quiet one, not as the easy one, but as someone who had reached her limit. I stepped back slightly, my hand resting on the door. That's all I have to say, I told them. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, without another word, they turned and walked away. And as I closed the door behind them, I realized something I never thought I would feel in that kind of moment. Not guilt, not fear, but peace. The house felt different after that day, not because anything changed on the outside, but because something inside me had finally settled. For years, I had lived in reaction mode, waiting for approval, bracing for criticism, preparing myself to be dismissed, corrected, or ignored. Now I wasn't waiting for anything, I was living. Adam slept more peacefully in the days that followed, as if even he could sense the calm I was finally building around us. I found myself smiling more without realizing it, small, quiet moments that didn't need anyone else's validation to feel real. And then, slowly the messages started again, but this time, they were different. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. Lena, can we talk? Mom, again, we might have misunderstood each other. No anger, no commands, no entitlement, just uncertainty. I read them without rushing to respond. For the first time, I didn't feel pulled into fixing things immediately. I simply observed, because something important had changed. They weren't in control of the conversation anymore. I was. A few days later, my mom called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Her voice was softer this time. Carefully measured. I just want to see the baby, she said. No demands, no criticism, just a request. There was a pause. I looked at Adam, lying in his crib, his tiny fingers opening and closing in sleep. Okay, I said finally, but on my terms. Another pause. Okay, she agreed. That single word felt heavier than anything she had ever said before. When they arrived, it was different. They didn't walk in like they owned the space. They waited, knocked. Waited again, and only when I opened the door did they step inside. No crossed arms this time. No phone scrolling. No immediate judgment. Lena even hesitated before approaching the crib. Can I? She asked, her voice uncertain. I nodded. Yes, I said. You can ask. She blinked at that, like she wasn't used to needing permission for something so simple. But she asked, and I let her hold him, carefully, respectfully, and something strange happened in that moment. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. My mom stood slightly behind her, watching, not correcting, not criticizing, just watching, And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the background character in my own home. I was the one setting the tone. After a while, Lena gently handed Adam back to me. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was such a small thing, but it carried weight. Later that evening, after they left, I sat by the window holding my son again. No tension, no fear, just stillness, and in that stillness I realized something important. This wasn't revenge in the way people usually imagine it. There were no arguments won, no dramatic revenge scenes, no shouting matches or public humiliation. My revenge was quieter, slower, more permanent. It was in the way I stopped explaining myself. It was in the way I stopped begging to be understood. It was in the way I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. Because when I finally stopped doing all of that, they had to change. Not because I forced them, but because I removed access to the version of me they had always taken for granted. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly things shifted. They asked before visiting. They listened instead of interrupting. They paused before assuming. And each time they did, I noticed something deeper underneath it all, not fear. Not guilt, respect. One afternoon, my mom stood in the doorway before leaving and looked at me for a long moment. "You're different," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes," I replied, "I am." She hesitated, then added something I never thought I would hear from her. "I didn't realize how much we were hurting you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to translate it into something more painful than it was. Because healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, after boundaries are finally respected. After silence is no longer used as punishment. After someone decides they matter enough to stop accepting less. That night, I put Adam to sleep and sat beside him, watching his peaceful face in the soft glow of the night light. And I understood something I had spent my entire life searching for. I hadn't lost my family. I had finally found myself within it. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.